Hi, and welcome to Historical Influence. Here, we explore amazing stories of people and events that shaped our history. Join us to learn, discover, and get inspired by the past in a fun and engaging way. Welcome to the story of a man whose shadows stretched across 2 centuries, a ruler who sought to drag a medieval state into the modern world. Peter the Great. Born Pyotr Alexeyevich on June 9, 1672 in Moscow, Russia, Peter I was a Russian Tsar who reigned from the late 17th century through the early 18th century. He remains best known for his extensive reforms aimed at establishing Russia as a great nation. Peter was the 14th child of Tsar Alexis by his second wife, Natalia Kirillovna Narishkina. His reign formally began in 1682, sharing the title jointly with his half-brother Ivan V until 1696. It was in 1721, however, that Peter achieved his ultimate recognition, proclaiming Russia an empire and receiving the titles Emperor of all Russia, Great Father of the Fatherland, and the Great. The formal title bestowed upon him was, by the grace of God, the most excellent and great sovereign emperor Pyotr Alexeyevich, the ruler of all the Russias, along with a long list of principalities and lands. Physically, Peter was imposing, especially for his time. He was seen as a second Goliath or Samson. He stood at roughly 6.5 feet tall, 2.03 meters. However, his appearance was also marked by noticeable facial tics, and he may have suffered from neck spasms. Despite his handsome features, he was known to drink excessively and harbor violent tendencies. Peter the Great was undeniably a dynamic figure who indelibly shaped the course of Russian history.
When Peter inherited the throne, he received a nation that was severely underdeveloped compared to the flourishing cultural and scientific prosperity seen across Europe. While the Renaissance and the Reformation swept through the West, Russia had remained isolated from modernization, rejecting Westernization. This initial state of backwardness profoundly shaped Peter's future ambition. Peter's early rule was turbulent. Following the death of his elder half-brother Fedor III in 1682, who had left no children, a dispute arose between the Miloslavsky family and the Narishkin family over the succession. Though the Boyar Duma initially chose the 10-year-old Peter to become Tsar, he was forced to rule jointly with his elder half-brother Ivan V, who was weak-minded and blind. During this period, power was effectively held by Sofia Alexeyevna, Peter's half-sister, who acted as regent during the minority of the sovereigns. Sofia led a rebellion of the Streltsy, Russia's elite military corps, in April-May 1682. In the subsequent violence, some of Peter's friends and relatives were murdered, acts of political violence that Peter witnessed. Sofia subsequently exercised all power as an autocrat for 7 years. Peter and his mother were essentially confined to Preobrazhensky from 1682 to 1689.
Yes, I am thinking we use this
to
design.
maintain control behind the scenes, a large hole was cut in the back of the dual-seated throne used by Peter and Ivan, allowing Sofia to sit behind it, feeding them information and responses during conversations with nobles. Peter became the sole independent sovereign only after his mother, Natalia, died in 1694. His joint reign with Ivan V officially ended when Ivan died in 1696.
Peter's path to reform began far from the ceremonial court.
He grew up at Izmailovo Estate and received education from several tutors commissioned by his father, including Nikita Zotov and Patrick Gordon. Peter was not interested in a musical education, but loved fireworks and drumming. He showed an early and deep fascination with technical and military matters. At the age of 16, he discovered an English boat, had it restored with the help of Dutch carpenters, and learned to sail. He sought foreign experts in the German quarter, befriending Andrew Venius and the Dutch carpenters Franz Timmerman and Karsten Brandt. He studied essential modern skills, arithmetic, geometry, and military sciences like fortification. This fascination led him to dream of making Russia a maritime power. These influences shaped a unique and often brutal ideology. Peter adopted what sources describe as a Protestant model of existence, focused on competition and pragmatic success. He highly valued the state's role, seeing it as an ideal instrument for achieving high goals and transforming people, even using violence and fear, into educated, conscious, and law-abiding subjects. He perceived the Russian people as rude, unintelligent, stubborn in their sluggishness, a child, a lazy student. Peter introduced the notion of the monarch's duties, believing it necessary to care for and protect his subjects. Above all, he prioritized the interests of Russia, subordinating his own life and the lives of his subjects to transforming the nation into a power similar to Western countries. Critically, he viewed the morality of a statesman separately from that of a private person, believing that a sovereign, in the name of state interests, can go to murder, violence, forgery, and deceit. He demonstrated this dedication to duty personally. Peter voluntarily went through naval service, starting from the lowest ranks, bombardier in 1695, rising to admiral in 2017, demonstrating a positive personal example of fully devoting oneself to the fulfillment of duty and service to the fatherland.
In the summer of 1689, Peter resolved to seize power from his half-sister Sophia, whose position was weakened by two unsuccessful Crimean campaigns. When Sophia conspired with leaders of the Streltsy, Peter escaped to the impenetrable Troitse-Sergieva Lavra monastery, where he gathered support. Sophia was eventually overthrown and forced to enter a convent, losing her name and position. By 1696, Peter was the sole ruler following Ivan V's death. One of his primary objectives was securing access to the sea. At the time, Russia was confined to the White Sea at Arkhangelsk, while the Baltic, Black, and Caspian Seas were controlled by foreign empires. Peter sought to acquire control of the Black Sea by waging war against the Crimean Khan and the Ottoman Sultan. His first attempt to capture the key Ottoman fortress of Azov, located near the Don River in the summer of 1695, ended in failure. Undeterred, Peter returned to Moscow and immediately began building a large navy in Voronezh. This shipbuilding effort was massive, and he launched about 30 ships against the Ottomans in 1696, successfully capturing Azov that July. This victory allowed him to officially found Taganrog, the first Russian Navy base on the Sea of Azov in 1698. Despite his ambitions, Peter faced significant internal opposition to his policies, but he brutally suppressed rebellions, including those by the Streltsy, Bashkirs, and Astrakhan, as well as the greatest civil uprising of his reign, the Bulavin Rebellion. In September 1698, after his return from Europe, Peter acted ruthlessly toward the mutineers of the Second Streltsy Uprising. Around 1,182 were tortured and executed, their bodies publicly exhibited as a warning. Peter also forced his half-sister Sophia into stricter seclusion at Novodovichi convent. Recognizing that Russia could not confront the Ottoman Empire alone,
Peter launched an unprecedented diplomatic and learning mission. In March 1697, he traveled incognito, using a fake name, to Western Europe on the 18-month Grand Embassy, marking the first time a Tsar had left Russia in over a century. Although he sought military aid from European monarchs, his hopes were dashed, as they were focused on the impending war of the Spanish succession. Despite failing to expand the anti-Ottoman alliance, the journey served a profound secondary goal: absorbing Western technology and culture. In Riga, the local Swedish commander refused to allow Peter to inspect the fortifications, an act Peter would later cite as a reason for starting the Great Northern War. In Königsberg, the Tsar spent 2 months as an apprentice to an artillery engineer. He traveled extensively through the Netherlands. He arrived in Zaandam in August 1697, studying sawmills, manufacturing, and shipbuilding, though he left after a week when he was recognized and attacked. In Amsterdam, Peter gained practical shipbuilding experience for 4 months at a Dutch East India Company shipyard. He felt the Dutch carpenters worked too much by eye, lacking accurate drawings. He put this knowledge immediately to use in helping build Russia's navy. While in the Netherlands, he collected biological specimens from Frederick Roosch for his future Kunstkamera. He also received an eel viewer, likely a microscope, from Antony van Leeuwenhoek in Delft. The embassy then proceeded to England. Peter stayed at 21 Norfolk Street and at Sayes Court as the guest of John Evelyn, a member of the Royal Society. He watched Parliament proceedings from a rooftop window. He visited the Royal Mint 4 times and was impressed by the great recoinage of 1696. King William III even presented him with a schooner. The journey continued through Leipzig, Dresden, Prague, and Vienna before news of the Streltsy uprising forced his early return.
After concluding a temporary peace with the Ottoman Empire that allowed him to keep Azov, Peter turned his military attention north. He sought to challenge the Swedish Empire, led by the young King Charles XII, to gain access to the Baltic Sea. Peter joined Denmark, Norway, Saxony, and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in declaring war, launching the long and brutal Great Northern War. Russia was initially ill-prepared. The first attempt to seize the Baltic coast was a disaster at the Battle of Narva in 1700. Following this defeat, Peter ordered the melting of church bells into cannons and mortars to rebuild his military strength. Charles XII then focused his forces against the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which crucially bought Peter time to reorganize the Russian army. Peter made significant gains in the Ingrian campaign, capturing the Swedish fortress of Nodeburg, which he renamed Schleselburg. On June 29, 1703, on the shores of the Neva River, Peter founded St. Petersburg. He forbade the construction of stone buildings elsewhere in Russia, so that stonemasons would focus solely on building the new capital. He quickly oversaw the construction of key military sites, including the shipyard at the Admiralty, Kronstadt, and the Peter and Paul Fortress. In 1712, he officially moved the capital from Moscow to St. Petersburg, which was soon deemed Russia's window to Europe. In 1708, Charles XII invaded Russia. Peter employed a scorched earth strategy, destroying anything that could aid the Swedes, forcing the Swedish army to halt their advance during the severe Russian winter. Peter achieved a critical victory in July 1708 at the Battle of Lesnaya, crushing Swedish reinforcements. The culmination came in the summer of 1709 at the Battle of Poltava, a decisive defeat for the Swedish forces. This victory shattered the view that Russia was militarily incompetent and forced Charles XII to seek refuge in the Ottoman Empire. Overestimating his Balkan allies, Peter then attacked the Ottoman Empire in the Russo-Turkish War of 1710. This campaign was disastrous, and the resulting Treaty of the Pruth forced Peter to return the Black Sea ports he had seized in 1697. During this period,
The Ottomans called him Mad Peter, or Deli Petro, due to his willingness to sacrifice large numbers of troops. The Great Northern War finally ended with the Treaty of Nystad in 1721. Russia acquired Ingria, Estonia, Livonia, and a substantial portion of Karelia. In return, Russia paid 2 million riksdaler and surrendered most of Finland. The Tsar's navy was so powerful that the Russians could penetrate Sweden itself, winning the Battle of Gangut in 1714. These territorial gains secured Russia's position as a major European power.
Peter's reign was characterized by sweeping revolutionary changes that affected nearly all facets of Russian life. His primary goal was the modernization and westernization of the country, moving away from traditionalist and medieval systems towards those that were modern, scientific, and based on radical Enlightenment principles. Militarily, besides creating a strong navy, he reorganized his army according to Western standards. He developed science, recruiting experts to educate his people about technological advancements. Educational reforms included secularizing schools and founding institutions like the Moscow School of Mathematics and Navigation in 1701. Recognizing the lack of educated personnel, Peter issued a decree in 1714 calling for compulsory education, requiring all Russian children of the nobility, government clerks, and lesser-ranked officials aged 10 to 15 to learn basic arithmetic, trigonometry, and geometry. In administration, Peter sought to abolish Russia's archaic form of government. In 1711, he abolished the Boyar Duma and established a new state body, the governing Senate, composed of 10 members. The Senate was the highest state institution, supervising all judicial, financial, and administrative affairs. Peter later established collegiums in 1718, replacing the old central agencies of government, managing areas like foreign affairs, war, navy, and justice. One of his most enduring and transformative administrative reforms was the introduction of the Table of Ranks in 1722. This decree created a new order of precedence for landowners, where rank was determined by merit and service to the emperor, explicitly intended to deprive the medieval boyars of their high positions based solely on birth. The Table of Ranks remained in effect until the monarchy was overthrown in 1917. Peter also implemented significant cultural changes mirroring the West. He modernized the Russian alphabet, introduced the Julian calendar, changing the New Year celebration from September 1 to January 1, and established the first Russian newspaper, Sankt Petersburgsky Vedomosti, in 1703. Furthermore, he compelled courtiers and officials to wear European clothing, no kaftans, and cut their long beards, leading to great upset among boyards and old believers. Those who insisted on keeping their beards were required to pay an annual beard tax of 100 rubles. He also sought to end the practice of arranged marriages among the Russian nobility, viewing it as barbaric. Economically, Peter concentrated on developing commerce and industry, creating a gentrified bourgeoisie population. He launched an industrialization effort that, though slow initially, was successful. The Berg Privilege of 1719 enshrined the privileges of miners, allowing representatives of all classes to search for ores. A 1721 decree even permitted factory owners, regardless of noble rank, to buy serfs. He also changed the system of direct taxation, abolishing the land and household taxes and replacing them with a poll tax, payable to serfs and paupers. While Peter's reforms transformed Russia into a major European nation, his path was marked by cruelty and tyranny. The high taxes accompanying his reforms led to revolts among citizens, which the imposing ruler immediately suppressed. His control extended directly into the spiritual realm. Peter had low regard for the traditional church hierarchy. In 1700, when the office of the Patriarch of Moscow became vacant, Peter refused to name a replacement, taking greater control over the reactionary Orthodox Church.
He could not tolerate the Patriarch exercising powers superior to the Tsar. In 1721, Peter abolished the Patriarchate entirely, replacing it with the Holy Synod, a council of 10 clergymen placed under the control of a procurator. He also implemented a law prohibiting Russian men from joining a monastery before the age of 50, believing too many able men were being wasted on clerical work instead of joining his army. Peter's cruelty manifested tragically within his own family. He married twice and had 15 children in total, though only 3 survived to adulthood. His first marriage, to Eudoxia Lopukina, was a failure. Peter forced her into a convent in 1698. The eldest son from this marriage, Alexei Petrovich Tsarevich of Russia, was suspected of plotting to overthrow the emperor. Alexei was convicted of high treason by his father and, having confessed under torture, died in prison in 1718. Historians suggest his death most likely resulted from injuries suffered during his torture. Peter's second wife, Marta Skoronska, later Catherine I, whom he secretly married around 1707 and officially in 1712, he crowned as empress in 1724, though he remained the actual ruler.
In the final years of his life, Peter continued to pursue expansion. Taking advantage of the deep decline of the Persian Safavid Empire, he launched the Russo-Persian War of 1722 to 1723. This campaign drastically increased Russian influence in the Caucasus and Caspian Sea region, forcing the Safavids to cede territories including Derbent, Baku, and Gilan. Meanwhile, Peter continued his monumental construction projects. In 1725, the construction of Peterhof, a palace near St. Petersburg known as the Russian Versailles, was completed. Peter's health, which was never robust, began to fail in the winter of 1723 due to problems with his urinary tract and bladder. Though doctors performed surgery in the summer of 1724, his health never fully recovered. Legend suggests that his bladder problems were exacerbated after he waded into icy water in November 1724 to rescue drowning soldiers. In early January 1725, Peter was struck once again with uremia or azotemia. Peter the Great died in St. Petersburg on February 8, 1725, at the age of 52 years and 7 months. An autopsy revealed his bladder was infected with gangrene. He died without nominating an heir. He was succeeded by his wife, Catherine I. Peter I is entombed in the Cathedral of Saints Peter and Paul in St. Petersburg. The legacy of Peter the Great is a complex tapestry. His efforts ended the dominance of traditionalism and religion, initiated westernization, and fostered rapid development in the national economy, trade, education, science, and culture. Russia became a great power, integral to European affairs. Historian James Crackcraft argues that the Petrine Revolution was essentially a cultural revolution that profoundly impacted the Russian Empire. However, for some, his methods were destructive. For the old believers, he was the Antichrist due to his calendar and poll tax changes. Critics view Peter as the creator of the administrative command system and the true ancestor of Stalin, arguing that his actions put a brake on Russia's long-term progress. Nonetheless, Peter I remains the Tsar who fundamentally reshaped Russia's identity, guaranteeing its place on the global stage. Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that shaped our world.